Hey everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome to my kitchen. I am very happy to have you here with me today. We are going to be making 3 different recipes today. We are going to start with my grandma's, or my great-grandma's rather, Nanaimo Bars. And this, you can't really see that very well, but this is one of the pages out of my cookbook that's going to be coming out very, very soon. I know I've been talking about this for months. It was definitely a bigger project than I had originally anticipated, but we are just about finished. We have actually decided to do 2 separate cookbooks rather than one large one. And the reason for that is because we wanted to make it as affordable to as many of you as possible. So there's going to be a dessert cookbook and then a dinner and lunch cookbook. And then there'll be a free one that comes with both of those that has some breakfast recipes. This way, if you only want the dinner recipes, you can buy just those separately, or the dessert recipes, or if you want both, you can buy them both together. And even the price of buying both of those together ended up to be less expensive in the end than doing one large cookbook. So I hope that this is going to work really well for all of you. We have also decided to do it in a couple of different options. We're going to do an ebook, so that way you can just get it, you can download it onto your phone or your computer or whatever and have it that way. But there's also going to be a print option as well for those of you that like print books like I do. So hopefully, fingers crossed that everything goes well, we will have that ready for you in probably about 2 weeks time. So we are going to do that one. We're going to start with the Nanaimo Bars. We are going to do the first place prize sandwich from this. I think Dan determined that this one was 1922 or thereabouts, this newspaper clipping. And it has 6 prizes and then a couple of honorable mentions for sandwiches. So we are going to do the first prize sandwich, which is called the Holiday Sandwich, and it looks super interesting. I'm finding most of the recipes from these old newspapers and old vintage recipe books are unlike anything I've really ever had before, so that should be fun. We are also going to do one that is another clip out from a newspaper from around the 1920s as well, as far as we can determine from the dates on the cookbook and all the other recipes that we found in here. And this one's called Hamburger Dinner, and it's basically a hamburger meatball in like a tomato soup sauce sort of thing. So we're gonna try that one out. That's what we're gonna have for dinner tonight. But we are going to start with doing the Nanaimo Bars and get those setting in the fridge. So this was my great-grandmother's recipe, and my grandmother taught it to my mom, and it was actually my grandpa's favorite Christmas bar. So this was one that they used in their family for Christmas time. I'm going to be using an ingredient that I have never used before in any cooking, and that is Birds Original Custard Powder. So this is what my great-grandma called for, so this is what I'm going to use. I checked out the ingredients and they're not too terrible. So we're gonna use those. We need to start with melted butter, which I have already melted over here on the stove, and you can probably hear Martha crackling away back there. I just filled her up so that we can cook today's dinner on Martha. One thing I wanted to say about my wood cook stove is so we're in my kitchen right now, and my wood cook stove is over here kind of in my living room area. And the reason that we did that is because we really didn't have anywhere else that we could put it where we could put a chimney all the way up through. We have a floor above us here, all the way through that and then out the roof of our house. And also because there wasn't really anywhere in my kitchen to put it. However, if you do have an opportunity to put a wood cook stove in your house, I would recommend you put it in your kitchen or very close to your kitchen if you can, because it is a little bit of a hassle to go between my kitchen and Martha over here to do my cooking. The one advantage of having her over here is that it really does help to warm up this space just beautifully. When it is very cold, we always light that stove even if we don't need to use it for cooking, because the radiant heat is just absolutely marvelous. So I wonder if I have enough room to put all of this in here. Probably not, so we'll just get a slightly larger mixing bowl. Okay, so we're going to add 1/2 cup of butter into there, 1/2 cup of sugar, 5 tablespoons of cocoa powder. Vanilla. And everyone always teases me about using wet measuring cups for dry ingredients and dry measuring cups for wet ingredients, and I just use them interchangeably and usually works out just fine. One cup of coconut and half a cup of pecans. So we're mixing this up really, really well until it starts to stick together, and then we'll press this into the bottom of our pan. And I just realized I have an 8x8 pan, not a 9x9 pan, and this is quite a lot of filling, so I'm going to grab a slightly bigger dish for this. There we go. Okay, I don't know what I was thinking with the size of that pan, but that was definitely not big enough. So now we're just going to pack it down. So we need a 1/4 cup of butter for our filling. We need 2 cups of icing sugar. And 2 tablespoons of Birds custard powder. And 3 tablespoons of milk. Okay, now we have our filling here, and we're going to spread that atop of our base. Now we're going to chill this. When I was going through Betty's cookbook over here, The Art of Cooking and Serving, I found this really cool section that made me really happy for obvious reasons. It is called Large Quantity Cooking. And it says, "It often happens that it is the busiest housewife who is called on more frequently for outside duties, such as taking charge of church suppers, class luncheons, or the men's club dinner. A difficulty likely to confront her in the outset is the lack of adequate oven and stovetop space for cooking for 50 or more persons. 50 or more persons. So she must plan on a menu with this in mind. Questions like marketing, serving, and collecting china, silver, and linen for such a hungry mob fade into insignificance before the actual cooking." And then it says, "If then the lack of equipment or cooking space is a factor, she must plan the meal for the part of the food that may be prepared beforehand. Such things as pies, cakes, and donuts may be made outside and brought in at serving time. The menu should consist of at least 1 hot dish and a hot beverage, and if it is possible to bake hot biscuits or rolls, they will cause blessings to be showered on your head. The rest of the food may be cold: salads, cold meats, relishes, and desserts, of which last ice cream and pie know no rivals." Successful secrets. Plan menus with reference to equipment available and the amount of stovetop space with which to cook. Do as much preparation as possible the day before. Use large, shallow pans rather than deep ones for baking, as so to hasten the process. Bake cakes in large sheets and allow them to cool in the pan, frost, and cut into squares before serving. I don't even know what this is. It says keep a new clothes boiler for making coffee. To serve, dip out with a large pitcher and fill cups before putting them in onto the saucers. And then there's a bunch of different recipes like vegetable soup, mashed potatoes, baked beans, white sauce, macaroni and cheese, chicken a la king, chicken salad, a whole bunch of them that are made for upwards of 50 people to be able to serve. Coffee for 100 persons, cocoa for 100 persons, chocolate for 100 persons, and then how to prepare for 50 persons. And then there's all these things like ice cream, steamed pudding, strawberry shortcake, and then it tells you the amount needed to feed that many people. I love that. That's fabulous. Okay, so we are going to add 8 squares of baking chocolate. And we are going to add 2 tablespoons of butter. My Nanaimo bars aren't looking very pretty right now, but this chocolate will cover up all that messiness. Okay, there we go. Now we just have to let this chill. Okay, now we're going to get on to our hamburger dinner. Very original name, I think. Okay, so I have some ground beef here and I'm going to double this recipe. Into this, we are going to add 1/2 cup, or 1 cup in this case, since we're doubling it, of dried rice. And that's not something I've ever added to meatballs before. 1 chopped onion, which I already have over here. And green pepper. In this case, a little bit of mixed pepper. I have a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow in there as well. And salt and pepper. And this is just to taste, so just add however much you would normally add. I'm doing around 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, around 1 teaspoon of salt. And we're going to mix this all together. Okay, so this recipe also calls for some carrots and some celery, not in with the meat, but in the baking pan. So I'm just getting these all peeled up. And since I do not have condensed maple, or oh my word, my mouth sometimes, because I don't have any condensed tomato soup, I have just made a little tomato soup using canned tomatoes. Basically, I just cooked up some canned tomatoes with a chopped onion and some seasonings, and I will just throw that in there. Okay, now we're gonna mix up our meat. There we go. Now we're going to make our meatballs. So just a reminder, this is 2 pounds of ground beef for this recipe. This would probably be good served over mashed potatoes too. We have been able to determine that Betty, that's who the art of cooking and serving belonged to, lived in Ithaca, New York. And so the recipe that we're going to do next out of the newspaper was from a newspaper from Ithaca, New York. We weren't able to determine which newspaper, it was out of, but we were able to determine that it was from around 1921, 22 or so. And I mean, I'll share with you the name of the woman who won the first prize in this sandwich competition that we're going to make. And it also has her address as well, actually, which is really cool. I did get all of my, or almost all of my onions planted. Because my seeds were over a year old, I'm actually going to get some fresh seeds in the next couple of days and plant some more, just in case my germination isn't great. Onion seeds are one of those seeds that fresh seeds are best for them. And so I just really want to make sure that I get enough. I usually plant around 1,000 or so onions. So yes, I really want to make sure that I have enough and I don't come up short. These are pretty looking meatballs, and that's not something I can usually say about raw meatballs. And yep, you could absolutely use a ice cream scoop to do these with. I've seen people do that before. But as you probably have found by now, I'm pretty old school when it comes to cooking, and I don't usually use a ton of gadgets in my kitchen. Probably would make my life easier if I did, but I don't. A new kitchen gadget I am on the hunt for is a new mixer. So if any of you have recommendations for a mixer that you really love, I am looking for something that can do pretty large batches of bread. So I'm checking out the Bosch right now. But if you have one that you absolutely love, definitely let me know. My old KitchenAid has seen better days, and I am definitely in need of a new one. Okay, so I'm supposed to actually stick these carrot sticks in between these, which isn't going to really work with the size of batch that I have. So I think maybe I'll just start by sticking these ones in here now. And then add more meatballs on top. So interesting to me how connected to times gone by I feel making these recipes. Don't really understand it. I just feel connected to all of the women who came before me and were making these recipes long before I was even born for their families. It's a wonderful feeling. And it's fun for me to be bringing the names of these people, like Betty, for instance, bringing her recipes back into the game through this YouTube channel. I wonder what Betty must think, looking down and watching me make her recipes, or her little cutouts out of her cookbook that she carried around forever. It must be quite a delight to her, I imagine. Okay, we're just about to the end. Okay, so I'm supposed to mix the soup that I'm adding into this with a can of water. So we'll call that a cup. Okay, so here is my homemade tomato soup. So we're just going to pour this over the top of these meatballs and then cover this with tin foil and bake this until the meatballs are baked through. It actually says on this recipe, I think it says 20 minutes. Yeah, bake for 20 minutes. So this is definitely going to be more like 40 minutes to an hour, which is perfect because it's 4 o'clock right now, which means this will be done just in time for dinner. Now we are going to make our first prize holiday sandwich, and I will put this up on the screen for you as well. So this was entered and won by Mrs. Howard Livingston, Ithaca Road 3. So that was her address. This is so great. It says, put between slices of bread in the morning and surprise the family with a delicious hot sandwich without fussing in the kitchen at supper time. Only a minute to dip and fry them. So we are going to make the filling. And it says that this one is good for how many sandwiches? We'll make 8 sandwiches. So I am going to double this recipe. Are you coming in? Okay. The first thing that we need to do is cube up 2 cups of ham. So we're going to slice it off this ham. I'm really proud of these hams. These were ones that I did the meat cutting for and the brining for. Actually, let's just put this on the actual cutting board here. It does look good, hey? It turned out really well. Okay, so that's probably going to be around 2 cups worth.
And smells amazing.
And smells good too, hey?
Is that cooked already?
Yeah. I cooked it up yesterday. Oh, nice. Well, it looks really beautiful, sweetheart. You did a nice job. Yeah, that's great. So we want to do these cubes fairly small because they're going to be going into a hot sandwich. Okay, yum. I just love that this recipe outside of Mrs. Livingston's family has probably not been used very often in the last 100 years. And that makes me very happy. I just think that's so neat.
What kind are you making?
I am making this one that's called the Holiday Sandwich, and this was the first prize sandwich of chopped ham. But I have a feeling that their size of sandwiches is a little bit different than ours. So I think I'm gonna actually quadruple this recipe. Pardon me, what did you say, hon? 1/4 teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, in this case 1 full teaspoon. I'm going to actually mix that into this rather than put it in on top of the meat, so that way I don't end up with some pieces of meat completely saturated with the Worcestershire sauce. We need a teaspoon, so 4 teaspoons of lemon juice, 2 tablespoons chopped onion. Okay, so we need 8 tablespoons of chopped peppers, which I have around that in the bag. I have a feeling these are going to be scrumptious. Need a teaspoon, 4 teaspoons of mustard, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I am assuming a sour pickle is like a dill pickle rather than a sweet pickle. So I'm gonna chop some pickles to add in there. Okay, so these are some sour pickles that I made in the fall, and they're really tasty. So we're gonna do, how many tablespoons did I say that was? 8. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. And into that, we need to do our eggs. Okay, so we're going to mix this all together, and then this will sit in the fridge overnight, and tomorrow we will make these sandwiches up. I'm also going to have to make some more bread because I believe I'm out of bread. Actually, you know what? I will pull out some of the freezer bread that we made a couple of weeks ago. While I'm thinking of it right now, I'll go out and grab that because it does have to sit out overnight. So these are our loaves of frozen bread. So these will sit in the fridge overnight, and then we will bake them up when they're thawed in the morning, and we'll use that bread to make these sandwiches. I have a feeling these are going to be delicious. Okay, so then we put a little bit of mayonnaise in it to make it quite soft. Spread between 2 slices of bread cut from a small loaf. Hold together with toothpicks. Beat 1 egg. Mix 1/2 cup of milk. Dip each sandwich in the milk and the egg and brown in hot Crisco, in this case butter, on a fry pan until both sides are hot and crispy. So we will do that together tomorrow. Okay, I am going to do some cleanup on this, and then we will cut into those Nanaimo bars and see how they turned out. Do I need a sampler? Sure, I could definitely use a sampler. Here, that you are. They look pretty good though, hey? These are so sweet. I've never been a huge Nanaimo bar fan because of how sweet they are, but I know you like the sweet stuff. Here we go. Oh my word.
My Lanta.
Oh my Lanta. It's so good. Those are the best Nanaimo bars I've ever had. You're taking a much bigger piece out.
That is so good.
Right? So
Like,
good.
it has a caramelly taste. Try this.
You guys have got to try this one.
That's the best.
This is insane. These are so good. I am going to serve these up to my children, and they are going to be very happy. Look at that. So tasty. Okay, I am going to cover up this. Actually, no, what am I doing? I have to do the eggs first.
Much better than the store-bought ones.
Better than store-bought, hey?
100%.
Absolutely scrumptious. I still think they're pretty sweet, but they're delicious. Okay, we have our hard-boiled eggs in there, and I am just going to mash these up with my hands and then mix them in. I do not have any tricks for doing hard-boiled eggs. Sometimes I get lucky, like with this batch, and sometimes I don't. So what I always do is I put them in the water when it's cold, bring it up to boiling. Once it's boiling, boil it for 8 minutes for hard-boiled eggs. Put them in cold water, wait till they're fully chilled before trying to peel them. And that works most of the time, not all the time. Going to mix all this in with our ham. You know what I did? Is you know how I set the Worcestershire sauce aside so that I didn't pour it right on the ham and have some pieces saturated in it. And then my plan was to mix the other things in with that and then mix that into the ham. Completely forgot about the Worcestershire sauce until just now and ended up having to add it in on its own anyway. So this is what our sandwich filling looks like. So now I'm going to cover this and put it into the fridge overnight, and then we will come back tomorrow morning, or actually around lunchtime, and we will make up these sandwiches. I'm looking forward to it. I think they're going to be delicious. I will come back once our meatballs are out of the oven, and I'll let you know how those turned out before we sign off for today. Okay, I just pulled the meatballs out of Martha. Actually, I'll bring you over here. Be easier than. So that is what it looks like. It looks much better in person than it does on the camera. So let's try one and see how they taste. We're just going to make a big pot of rice. to go with this. So let's try. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, but I can tell you right now that my kids are going to think that this is delicious. So that makes it a win for me. I'm not sure how I feel about the rice in the meatballs. It's something I've never had before. Maybe it's common in other areas. You guys will have to tell me. But I've never had it before. Okay, we are going to have dinner, and then we will see you guys again tomorrow, probably for lunch, I think is when we'll have the holiday sandwiches, and I'll let you know how they turn out. I have the bread in the fridge, the freezer dough that we made, and I'll also show you how we bake that up in the morning too. See you soon, guys. Bye. Okay, we are now on to day 2. I have my bread that I have taken out of the fridge. It was thawing all night. It is now thawed, so I'm going to unwrap it and let it come up to room temperature and rise. So this is the first time that I have done this, so it's a little bit of an experiment. I have to admit, I'm a little bit skeptical about how this is going to work. These into the oven. And cover them with a dampened towel. I'm going to guess it's going to take probably an hour to get these warmed up and actually rising. Okay, we are going to now wait until our bread is baked, and then we'll get into making those sandwiches. I'm very interested to see how these are going to turn out. Okay, so we have our bread, and it hasn't risen up as well as it would have if it had been fresh. The other thing that I find, oh, that's not quite preheated yet, is that when I use my bread-proof option on my stove, it takes almost, I don't know, half as much time as it would if I were rising it on the counter, because it's just such a more optimal environment. But if I forget about it, like I just did, and I leave it in there for a little bit longer, it tends to overproof. So we'll see how this goes. For these sandwiches that we're going to make, it does call for small bread, so this might work out okay in the end. I want to show you something that I have over here that you may have noticed, and that is a little table with some grow lights and my tomato plants. And I just wanted to share with you why I'm doing this. These ones here are my dwarf tomatoes, so these ones aren't the micro dwarfs. And they are looking great. You can see a little tomato is already forming on that. This one is the broody hen. And what's this one over here? And this one is the Arctic rose. But my micro dwarf tomatoes, and it was only these ones. So can you see how yellow and sad this is looking? So there's two things going on with this tomato plant. Number one, it was too cold, so it got a little bit of stress from the cold. Normally you can tell if a tomato plant is stressed if it turns purple underneath like so. And then this yellowing that's happening down here is from a lack of fertilizer. So I used a potting soil that I've never used before. It was, what was it called again? Do you remember what that, I think it was ProMix. Yeah, it was organic ProMix potting soil that we bought. Normally I use SunGrow potting soil, and I have never had an issue ever with tomato seedlings, and it just did not have enough nutrients in it for these tomato plants. So I've actually been fertilizing. This is the first time I've ever fertilized tomato plants before, or any plants for that matter, outside of composting, you know, using my own compost in my garden. But it was necessary because otherwise those ones would not, they just weren't going to thrive. And so I decided to move them up here out of the grow room underneath this light, and I'll bring you over so that you can see it because I know it's dark as soon as I walk over there. So this little light here, it has 5 grow lights on it, and then it's also sitting in my window as well. And since I moved them up here, they are definitely looking a lot happier. So the ones that are down in my grow room, the other ones that were planted in different soil. I'll take you down there in a second. Those ones look just fine. So it was just a soil issue in this case. Look at how sad that poor little tomato plant looks. So we'll go down to the grow room and I'll show you what I have started down there, because I've also started a few new things in the last couple days. Okay, so these are my other micro dwarf tomato plants. They're underneath a purple light, which is why they look like that. But if we pull one out, so you can see it's nice and green, and there are little tomatoes on it looking nice and healthy. So this was definitely a soil issue. We have little lavender coming up all over, which is very exciting. Parsley, oregano, lemon balm. My lemon balm germination was not great. I only have 2 little baby lemon balms in there. And then in the back is my sage, and not one single one of those seeds has come up. So I'm gonna give them a couple more days and then I'm gonna replant that if they didn't come up. They were old seeds, so I'm not overly surprised. We have thyme and oregano over here, and some more lavender over here. These are daisies, snapdragons going absolutely crazy. But here is the weirdest thing. So this tray and this tray were planted at the same time. These ones obviously, great germination, everything looking good. These ones, not so much. They just have a couple coming up here, you can see here, and I cannot for the life of me remember if I used the same soil on these 2 trays, but there's obviously something dramatically different between these 2 because they were planted on the same day at the same time and have been treated exactly the same. So another little weird mystery for the year. So this is kind of an exciting tray down here. This is all celery, and I just planted it, so I don't expect that to come up for a while yet. Celery can take a long time to germinate. But over here is a little test I did on some of my own seeds. These are abundance kale seeds that I saved from my own plants last summer, and germination is perfect. It's just about, it's probably 95% germination rate. So that is absolutely phenomenal. I'm so excited about that. I have onions started here, and I have 20 seeds per tray. So each one of these should hopefully produce around 200 onion seedlings. 200 here and another 200 here. So we have 600 altogether, and I'm going to do 400 more. I might end up doing that today actually, because I like to have 1,000 started. So we have 4 shelves filled now, but by the end of March, or actually by the 2nd week of March, this is going to be completely full of all my seedlings. Yeah, so this is the stuff that I usually use, and I have never had a problem. I make all my soil blocks with these as well, or with the soil as well, just with some extra water added, and it has never caused me an issue. So they just didn't have it in when we went to buy soil the other day. Thankfully, we have 4 bales of it now. Okay, so we have our bread, and it definitely overproofed. It's a little bit flat, but since this recipe called for small pieces of bread, I think it's gonna work out just fine. So now we have our sandwich filling that we made yesterday, and I'm going to add a little bit of mayonnaise, which is what it calls for. To add to this, it doesn't say how much, so I'm going to add probably a cup or so, because this is quite a bit of filling. Still looks pretty good on the inside. Hey Dan, could you do me a favor and find the sandwich recipe? It should be in the front cover of Betty's cookbook over there. Oh, where do I want there? Oh, I just need to know what's in it. What I have to do for the, for the soaking. I think it was 1 egg and a half a cup of milk. It just has a dip kind of thing that I soak it in first. Okay, so since we're not using Crisco, we're going to use half butter and half lard. Yeah, this was the first prize sandwich. 1921, Ithaca, New York. I do not know how you're supposed to do this. This is not a good sized dish. Just a minute. Let's try this again. This should work better. It's going to be. Isn't this so cool that this sandwich has probably not been made in maybe even 100 years, unless this was a, you know, a family recipe that got carried down through the generations. I've certainly never seen anything like it before. You guys will have to tell me if you've seen anything like this sandwich before. Good. Yeah. I think I can go a little easier on the butter and the lard next time, but if you're going to eat a sandwich like this, you may as well just go for it and just add on all the fat and all the crispies and all the yumminess. It is your philosophy, yes. It's fully, just a full send. A full send. These smell incredible. If they taste anywhere near as good as they smell, I think they're going to be delicious. I feel like I'm taking a bite out of history here. Into history or out of history? I feel like it's into history.
I was going to, it could be either.
Could be, yep. Okay, so here it goes. That is the best sandwich. It is so delicious. You would.
Worthy of first place?
It's so worthy of first place. I can't even talk. It's so good. These sandwiches are absolutely delicious. I would highly recommend that you give them a try. I know they're a little bit of an added pain with having to make it the day before, but I think it's well worth it because the flavors really mingled together really well. It's absolutely delicious. You guys are going to love these sandwiches.
To do that, it'd probably gone forever.
That is such a good point. So Dan was just saying, he's like, you should really thank Betty for this, because Betty took the time to cut out a newspaper clipping, stick it in a recipe book. She held on to it for her entire life, as far as we can tell. The last date that's in there, I think, was in the 1940s or somewhere like that, somewhere in that range. And then she probably passed it on to someone, and then it sat in someone's back cupboard somewhere, and then was sold in an estate sale until it's made its way to me all the way up here in British Columbia. So I just want to thank Betty for doing that, for taking the time to do that, because without that, we wouldn't have this recipe here, and I'm sure it would have been lost for all time. And that is just, it's just amazing. And I'm really grateful to be a part of the whole story of this recipe. So this one's called the Holiday Sandwich. It was the first prize winner at the Ithaca. We're not sure which competition it was, but it was in Ithaca, New York. She was, let me give you her name again, the woman who wrote this recipe. So first place, the Holiday Sandwich, and it was Mrs. Howard Livingston, Ithaca Road 3. So thank you to both of those women for this recipe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I did. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.